Hey everybody, this is Mrs. Montague, and in this video we are going to cover Unit 3, Lesson 5, Intro to Programming on code.org. So I'm here in the Unit 3 Intro to App Design unit, and we're going to scroll down here and find Lesson 5, Intro to Programming, and we are going to cover bubbles 1 through 7 together. So let's go ahead and get started here with bubble 1. All right. For our first coding bubble here, all right, this should be a setup that you're kind of familiar with seeing even from our design mode. All right, we have our user interface over here on the left. Since we are in coding mode here, we have our toolbox that will have all of our coding blocks that we have access to that we can drag over to our workspace to actually do our coding in. And then we have our instruction panel, of course, at the top, and our debug console down here at the bottom. So we'll talk a little bit more about the debug console as we move through this lesson. All right, so the first thing that our instructions are telling us to do is to go ahead and run this program and see what it does. So I'm going to click on our orange run button to see what happens. All right, so I can see that it's highlighting in yellow the lines of code that are running. It is going very slow. You can see down here I've got this slider. It's got a turtle on it and a rabbit on it. So it's either slow or fast. So right now it's set to very slow so we can see what's happening. All right, nothing has changed on our user interface because these are console.log messages. So the console.log messages only show up down here in our debug console. That's the only place that you're going to see that information. So we are getting console log messages that say, "Hi, this is a very simple program. You can display text in quotes, but you can also display numbers like this." And then we get the number 100. And then it says, "Try adding some code of your own below." So if we scroll down a little bit, it's telling us to discuss why we think some information is in quotes and some is not. So it tells us it can display text in quotes. We can see lines 1 through 4, and then line 6 are all text-based messages that are being displayed, and these are all in quotation marks. And then on line 5, that's the only one that's different. That is our number, and our number doesn't have any quotation marks around it. So the numbers don't need to have quotation marks, but the text does. All right, so that's just something to note. And our last set of instructions says to modify by adding 2 lines of code. One should display a string, and then one should display a number. All right, so we have our console.log code block here in our toolbox. So I'm going to go ahead and drag 2 of these over here. I'm just going to go ahead and do both of them at the same time because we need to add 2 lines of code, right? So I've added a console.log on line 7 and a console.log on line 8. All right, they automatically have the word message in quotation marks when you add them to your coding workspace. So we can just simply replace what's inside the quotation marks with a string of our own. So I'm just going to type in a message, all right, "Hello world," and that satisfies adding a line of code that displays a string. So now we want to add a line of code that displays a number. All right, so when I click on the word message, it's going to highlight that whole word, and I'm going to put in my favorite number as 7. All right, so I left 7 in quotation marks. When I reset and run this again, all right, it's going to go through all of these same console logs. It's going to highlight the lines that it's currently working on and that we're seeing in the debug console down here. And once it gets to my new lines down here, 7 and 8, you can see "Hello World" has displayed correctly. And it still has displayed the number 7, but it has quotation marks around it. So you can still display a number with quotation marks around it, but you don't need them. So either way, you want to do it, but best practice to keep your code clean is to get rid of those quotation marks around your number. So I'm going to go ahead and backspace those quotation marks out of there so it looks like our other number line on line 5 without those quotation marks. All right, if I went ahead and said let's backspace out these quotation marks around my string message of "Hello World," let's go ahead and get rid of those quotation marks. it will not run this code now because I have an error, right? This program doesn't know what to do with the string hello world without quotation marks around it because it thinks that this is some other sort of coding command, but it's not recognizing it. Okay, so we have to have those quotation marks around our strings, our text-based messages, in order for them to actually display correctly. All right, and this is going to be true if you are setting a property on the screen or if you are displaying anything in the debug console, right? If it's something text-based that you are displaying, you need to have quotation marks around it. All right, just driving that point home. Make sure you have those quotation marks when you need them, and everything should be all good to go. All right, once you've added your 2 new lines of code, let's go ahead and move on to bubble number 2. All right, for you guys, I'm going to head back to bubble number 1 real quick. All right, once you've added your lines of code, I prefer that you guys click on the finish button down here below your user interface. So that is what turns the bubble green. And that indicates to me when I go to grade that you have done the work. All right, just saying. I'm just clicking through at the top because I'm the teacher and I don't want to submit my work because I want to be able to edit it and show it again and again and again for different classes. All right, so bubble number 2, let's get started. All right, so now we have a user interface that actually has an element on it. We have an element ID of the big button in the middle. So we have this big blue button, and the background of our screen is yellow, so it looks nice, blue and yellow. All right, so it says go ahead and run this program to see how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and click on our orange run button down here. All right, again, we are getting a console log message highlighted that says starting my program. Then we have this line that says set property. And then our property is this big button. Okay, it's saying the background color and then blue. And then we have another set property for the big button that says height is 200. And then we have another set property for the big button that says text. And then now it's a bigger button, and then a console log that says ending my program. All right, so line by line, that's what we've done here. So what do you guys think the difference is between a console.log and a set property? So I'm going to reset this and run it again so we can kind of watch this go again. All right, so we see our first console log displays down here. But then when we get to these set properties, nothing is changing in our debug console, but information on our screen is changing. Okay, and it's not until we get down to line 5, our second console log, that something else shows up in our debug console. All right, so what's the difference? A console log, right, is going to add information to our debug console. It's not anything that displays in our user interface. So like a user of your app is not going to see these console logs. They're not going to have any idea that they're here. You as the developer are the only person that's going to know that those are there. All right. The set properties, however, are actually going to change properties of one of the elements on screen. So if you remember from our intro to design lesson, right, we have all of these different design elements, and then once you add design elements to your user interface, you have all of the properties that you can change about it. You can change the color, what the text says, you can change the height, the location on the screen, etc. So a set property is basically letting us change those properties of our on-screen elements without having to go into design mode and manually change them. The code is doing it for us, okay? So to modify this app, we're going to add one console log and we're going to add one set property to this program. So when we do this, all right, we see under our UI controls in our toolbox, we have this set property. I'm going to go ahead and drag one of these in here. I'm going to put it up above our ending program console log message because we're not going to end our program and then run more code, right? And then we also want to add a console log. So to find that, we need to switch over to our variables option in the toolbox, and then we can find our console.log. All right, and we're going to drag one of these in as well. So I'm going to put the console log right up here above my new set property. All right, so it's after their set properties they already had and before the new set property that I've added. All right, so with my console log, I'm going to say that I'm going to change the button color. All right, so we already changed the background color of the big button to blue in line 2, but when I run my program, I'm going to change it again. All right, so with my set property, all right, the only element that we have on here is the big button, right? So that's what we're going to be changing. You can see that each of these has a drop down on it, so you can click on the drop down and it's going to show you all of the properties that you have the ability to change. So actually, instead of changing the button color, I'm going to go ahead and change the screen color, right? Because right now, the big button has had a bunch of changes, but we haven't changed anything about our screen in the background. So let's go ahead and change something about that. All right, I have my big button I could change, but I'm going to change screen 1. Okay, and I don't want to set the width of the screen. That's going to just be default. I can't change anything about that. But I'm going to change the background color of the screen, and I'm going to change it to purple, my favorite color. All right, so we are going to hopefully see the screen change its background color to purple once we run this program. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and reset and run it again. All right, so we get our starting my program console log message. The background color of the button changed to blue. The height changes to 200 pixels tall. Now the text changed to it's a bigger button. Then we get the message that our screen is going to change color in the console log. The screen changed to purple, and then we ended the program. All right, so it worked. That's awesome. All right, if you change it to the big button element ID, that's what you're going to edit instead, you get a whole lot more options all of a sudden. All right, because with the screen, there is only a limited number of things that you can do with the screen to change it. It doesn't have that many properties that you can edit. All right, the button, on the other hand, has a lot more properties that you can change. So you would have a lot more options here that you can see what they do. All right, but up to you, whatever you want to add for your set property, just make sure you add at least one set property that changes something about what we are seeing on the user interface over here. All right, so once you're done, go ahead and click on the Finish button, and we'll move on to bubble number 3. All right, again, we have bubble number 3 telling us to run this program to see how it works. That's typically always going to be the first instruction that you get. All right, so I'm going to click on Run. Okay, and it also tells us, rather than just running the program, we want to make sure that we click on the button on the screen, right? So this is the button, that light blue button in the middle. I'm going to click it. Ooh, and once I clicked it, it changed the background color, it changed the height, and then changed the text that was displaying on there. And then I get a message in my console log that says I clicked the button. Okay, so interesting. It didn't change anything until I clicked on that button. So what do we have that's new here? We have this thing called an on event. All right, so an on event block is basically something that is going to make it so we have to, as the user, do some sort of action before anything is going to happen. All right, so rather than it just displaying everything automatically for us, which is what's called sequential programming, we are doing what is called event-driven programming with the on event. All right, so we got the console log message that the program was starting, and then the console log message that the program was ending before we ever even clicked the button, right? So I didn't have to do anything to make number or line 1 and line 8 actually start running. The only thing I had to do was click on the button to trigger the on event on line 2. All right, so the user has to do something to trigger whatever's happening inside the on event before it will happen. Okay, so on this on event, we can see that the big button needed to be clicked, right, in order for these set properties to take effect and that this console log message would display. All right, you can see here on our on event for the big button, right, they wanted us to click it. You could also make any change to the big button, do a key up, a key down, a key press, a mouse move, a mouse up, a mouse down, mouse over, etc. All right, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a click that triggers the action. It can be any of these things that trigger what happens inside the on event. But click is generally the most common. All right, so when we click on the big button, then lines 3 through 6 begin running, and we are able to actually see what happens with the program. All right, so our modifications on here, we need to add a command inside the on event and then add a command outside of the on event. All right, so I am going to go ahead and do a set property for both of my commands. All right, I'm going to do one set property outside of the on event, and I'm going to put it at the very top here, right, before we get to our on event, so it becomes line number 2. All right, for this set property, I'm going to go ahead and change my big button this time. And I'm going to go ahead and change the background color. No, let's actually go ahead and change the font family. That's fun. All right, so I'm going to change the font. All right, instead of the font being Arial as the default, I'm going to say I want the font to change to Impact. All right, so our font should change automatically when I click Run on the program. And then we still need to add something inside of our on event. So I'm going to go ahead and drag another set property over here, and I'm going to put it towards the end of our on event between the last set property that they had programmed in and the console log. All right, so now I'm going to change this time the screen again. All right. And this time I'm going to change the background color again. And let's just go ahead and do purple. Okay, so we're going to change our background color of the screen to purple again, because I just love purple and it goes so well with blue. All right, so let's go ahead and see what happens. We're going to click on reset. All right, we always have to reset and then run it again if we've made changes to our code. So I'm going to reset and run it, and we'll see what happens. All right, so I click on run. We get the starting my program message. And then our font has changed to Impact on our button. And then we get the console.log message ending my program. All right, but we haven't clicked on this button yet, so nothing from lines 3 through 9 have ran. All right, so it's waiting for me to click before any of this happens. So I'm going to click the button. When I click the button, it changes to blue, the height changes, the text changes, and then our screen background color changes, and we get the you clicked the button message in our debug console. All right, so anything outside of the on event is just automatically going to run. Anything inside the on event is waiting for the user to take some action before those lines of code run. All right, so once you have your 2 lines of code added, one command inside your on event and one outside of it, go ahead and click on Finish, and we will move on to bubble number 4. All right, here in bubble number 4, all right, you can see that our run button is grayed out. There's nothing I can do with it, okay? This is a prediction bubble, so we just need to read through the code that they already have in here. Goodness. All right, and predict what's going to happen. All right, so it says read through the following program, paying special attention to what commands are inside and outside of the on-event block. After discussing the following questions with your partner, write down your predictions and run the code to see what the program does. All right, so you're not going to be able to run this code until you make a prediction here. All right, so it says what happens when you run the program without clicking on any of the buttons, and then what happens when you run the green button. So let's go ahead and put in an answer here. All right, if I don't click any button, only lines, anything outside of the on event is going to run. Okay, so I know lines 2 through 7 aren't going to run because that's my on event. So only lines 1, 8, 9, and 10 are going to run. All right, if I click the green button, Okay, so we have this green button here, and then we have this yellow button. All right, we have an on event in line 2 that says if our green button is clicked, all right, we're going to change the width of the green button. We're going to change the text of the green button, and then we're going to change the font of the green button, and then get a message that says you clicked the button. So if I click the green button, right, lines 3 through 6 are going to run and change properties of the green button. All right, so that's my prediction. Okay, so now that I have put my answer here in the prediction box, I can click on the run button now to see if what I predicted actually happens. So let's go ahead and run it. All right, so we do get, starting my program, we do get the yellow button border width change, the yellow button font size changes, and then the message ending my program displays in the debug console. All right, so as predicted, lines 1, 8, 9, and 10 all ran because I didn't have to do anything to trigger those. All right, now if I click on the green button, then we get the width changing, we get the text changing, and the font changing. All right, so all of those things within that on event ran once I clicked on the green button, which is what it was waiting for. All right, so our prediction was correct. Good job, us. All right, so once you're done and you've made your predictions and seen if your predictions were correct, we're going to go ahead and finish and move on to bubble number 5. All right, so we're going to go ahead again, run this program to see how it works, and it says make sure you click the button on the screen again. All right, so we have some kind of on event, we know. All right, so I'm going to click on run. All right, this program, we can tell if we read through it, right? We only have 2 on events, so nothing is changing here until we click on one of our buttons, okay? So we have a button up here that says go to the next screen, so I'm going to click on that. That's our next button. Okay, so I clicked it. It set my screen to screen 2, all right? And then it says I clicked the next button in the console log. All right, and then we have another button on this screen that says back to the home screen. So I'm going to click on this button, and when I click on that button, it says set screen to the home screen, and our console log says you clicked on the back button. All right, so we can see that both of our buttons triggered a screen change. So rather than a property of one of the elements on the screen changing, it actually changed which screen we were looking at. So that's pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to hit reset over there. Let's see what we should discuss. All right, so it says, how does the set screen block work? Right, so I am setting the screen to a specific screen that I'm going to look at, right? So it's changing from one screen to the other. If I switch this over really quick to design mode, we can see that we have our home screen, and then we have screen 2. So we have 2 screens on this app, and I can switch between them in design mode with this drop down. All right, but when I'm in the code mode, all right, we don't have the ability, we have the ability to see which screens we have. All right, we can switch through them when the program's not running. When our program is running, the only way to get to the different screen is by using a set screen, okay? So obviously, the users of your app aren't going to have access to your design mode or your code in the background, so they need to be able to get to the different screens somehow. All right, so that's what the set screen does. It just changes the screen based on a button click or a mouse over or whatever the case, all right? So we can navigate back and forth. All right, now we want to modify here. All right, so we want to add one command inside the second on event to set one property of the home icon. So this is telling us specifically we need to change a property of the home icon. And we need to put this inside the second on event. All right, so I'm going to move or drag a setProperty command. Okay, because it's telling us to set a property of the home icon. All right, so I'm going to drag a setProperty into this second on event. That's what it's telling us to do. All right, and I want to change a property of the home icon, which is this little home icon in the middle of our home screen. All right, so we are going to select the home icon. Okay, that's what we want to change. And we can change any property of this that we want to, right? We can change its width, we can change its height, we can add text to it, we can change its coordinates on the screen, we can add an image to it, we can change the color of it, we can add a border, a lot of different things that we can do. So I'm going to actually go ahead, let's add a border to this. So right now our border is 0, it doesn't have a border. I am going to set our border width to 2. So it's a fat border on it. All right, so I've added my set property inside of the second on event to change a property of the home icon. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Okay, so of course I need to click on things to actually see what's going on. So I'm going to click on the next screen. And then my set property for the home icon should take effect as soon as I click on this back button. So I'm going to click back to the home screen. And then we do get a nice little border around our home button. All right, so we know that our set property worked. It added a border as we wanted it to. All right, good to go. So once we are done here, we're going to go ahead and finish and move on to bubble number 6. All right, we're getting a little bit more complicated here, but not too crazy. All right, we are going to look at this cats or dogs app. We're going to run the program to see how it works and make sure that we click both of these buttons. All right, so let's go ahead and run it. All right, I'm going to click on the cats button first. Ooh, so we get a little picture of a cat. It says cats rule down here in this box, and then we heard a cat meow. All right, now what happens if I click on dogs? All right, so our image changes to an image of a dog. Our text right here changes to dogs are number 1, and that's it. Nothing else happened. All right, so we have a few things here that we haven't seen before. Well, one thing in particular, and that's called the play sound block. So when I click on the cat image, right, that cat meow sound plays. So that is called a play sound. So we can see here with our play sound button, it is playing this cat animal sound. All right, if I click on the drop down on our play sound block, we get this blue link that says choose, ... So ominous. All right, so let's go ahead and click on choose and see what we have here. All right, so code.org has a sound library, so that's pretty cool. You can go through code.org's sound library and find all kinds of sounds to use in your app. There's fun little like tinkly noises that you can play. There's voiceovers. There's some music. There are notification noises, poof noises, sports noises, whooshes, slides, tapping sounds, space sounds, all right, all kinds of stuff. So they have all of these sounds built in here. So let's go ahead and click into the animals one. All right, we know our cat's probably going to be in there somewhere. All right, we've got a cat.mp3. We have all of these different sounds that we can play right built into our code.org sound library. So one thing I think is really cool about code.org is that they also have the ability for you to make new sounds with the play sound block. So you can upload a file. So if you have like a song downloaded or something like that, you can upload that song into your app. For it to play that music. You can also record audio. So that's one of the funnest things, I think, is hearing student recorded audio and some of the ridiculous things they come up with. It's very entertaining to me. So think about recording some audio for your app if you are just bored with the sound library options, what they've already got built in. All right, so the play sound block obviously works by playing a sound, okay? One other thing on the play sound block to make you aware of, if you click on this little arrow to expand the block a little bit more, we get another drop-down menu that says true or false. So this is going to be sound looping. So if I click on true, all right, let's see what happens. Let's go ahead and run and click on our cat button again. All right, so if I set this to true over here for this second drop-down menu, what's going to happen is that the sound is going to loop. So over and over and over again, that sound is going to play. If it is set to false, that means the sound is going to play one time and then it will be done. All right, so I'm going to leave this set to false because I do not need an endless cat meowing. Yeah, we'll pass on that. All right, so we also have, well, we do have another new line here that have a beginning with the ///. So lines 1 and 2, and then lines 9 and 10, all right, are a new block of code here that we're seeing. And it says in lines 1 and 2, when the user clicks the cat button, play a meow sound and show the cat image in text. And then in lines 9 and 10, it says when the user clicks the dog button, play a woof sound and shows dog image and text. All right. So when I run this app, I don't see those lines of code like showing up anywhere. I don't get any kind of messages in the debug console. None of that information is displaying on the user interface. All right, so these are actually called comment blocks. So these are just coding comments that we put in to basically explain what certain blocks of code do. These are really, really useful. So when you are coding, especially with like a bigger project, or even pair programming, so you're working with others on a program, the comments are so useful to know exactly what each section of code is doing. So like if I'm working with a partner and we're both working on coding, I can put in comments on the code that I write so my partner knows what sections of code I've been working on, and vice versa. I can read their comments to know exactly what they've been coding. It's also useful like if I start working on an app and then I maybe leave it sit for a few days and then come back to it later and forget what I've done. If I've used coding comments, then I kind of get an idea of what I've done because I've left comments about what I've done, right? So it kind of helps us keep track of our code and know exactly what's happening where, all right? So these are just comments. They're only for the programmer's use. They don't display anywhere. It's just so you know exactly what's going on with the code, all right? Every app that you build in here, I expect you to have comments in it. All right. It's something that you're graded on. It's something that is very, very important if you have any aspirations of getting into a professional coding position or anything like that. You want to use those comments because most likely you're not going to be working independently of everything else. You're going to be working with other people and you need to be transparent about what's going on with the code. All right. So you want to make sure that you have those comments in there. They are actually very useful. All right. So now we're going to do these modifications here. So it says to add code so the dog button makes a sound too, because if we remember, we did not have any noise play when the dog button was clicked, even though our comment says it should play a woof sound. All right, and then it also tells us to change the messages when each button is clicked. So before we change the messages, we're going to go ahead and put in our play sound block to our dog button. I'm going to set it up exactly the same way as the cat button was, with the play sound between these two set properties. Okay, I'm going to leave this set to false. I do not want it to loop a dog woof over and over and over again. But we do want to go ahead and choose a sound. So we're going to go back into our animal sounds and we need to find our dog sound. All right, so we can see here we have the dog sound. These are all in alphabetical order, so that's useful. If I click this little play button next to it, it's going to give me the preview. All right, so we hear that dog barking. All right, so this is a good sound. So I'm going to select this dog one, and then down here I'm going to click this orange choose button. So that's the sound I am choosing to have play there. All right, so now we can see the sound is the category animals, and it's that dog MP3 that we were looking at. All right, so we have chosen that dog sound to play. I'm going to test it before I change anything else about this app, okay? So when I click on the cat button, all right, and we know it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now if I click the dog button, all right, it changes our message and our image, and then we heard that dog barking noise. All right, perfect. So we've got our sound added there. So the second thing we need to do before we move on is change the messages when each button is clicked. So we have this set property in the cat button to change the message label. That's a text change, right? Right now it's set to cat's rule with an exclamation mark. We have that same set property in the first line of the dog on event that says message label text is changing to dogs #1 exclamation mark exclamation mark. So I'm going to go ahead and change both of these texts. The first one I'm going to change to cats are the best. And the second one I'm going to change to dogs are okay, I guess. I know that'll make you mad. Most of you like dogs better than cats. I'm a cat lady. What can I say? All right, so we've changed our messages. So now we're just going to run our code to make sure that those messages are actually displaying when we run the program. All right, so we're going to go ahead and run. When I click on the cat button, all right, now we get the message cats are the best. And when I click on the dog button, then we get dogs are okay, I guess. It doesn't really display that well because it's too long of a message for that box, but whatever. We still change the message. All right, so we got that done. When you are satisfied, you can go ahead and click on finish and move on to bubble number 7, the last coding bubble we're going to cover today. All right, so let's go ahead and run this program and see how it works. We're going to run it. We have a message on here that says save the sparrow, and I can hear some tweeting happening. All right, and I know that's because on line 2, I have a play sound that's outside of an on event, and it's changing, or it's playing this forest woodland loop on a loop, so we're going to hear these nice bird sounds. All right, and then we can see if we read the code that I have an on event for the hawk, mouse over instead of a click, and an on event for the sparrow, again, mouse over instead of a click. So I don't need to click on anything, but if I move my mouse over top of the sparrow, the sparrow and the hawk have changed locations on the screen, and then the message down here says I saved another sparrow since I moused over the sparrow. If I mouse over the hawk, it plays a different noise, and the hawk and the sparrow have moved on the screen again, and then the message changes down here to say avoid the hawk. All right, so we can mouse over this hawk and sparrow a bunch of times, and it's going to play those different noises and change our message while moving the hawk and sparrow around the screen. All right, so let's go ahead and reset here, right? We've seen how this app works. All right, this one has another new line of code that we haven't seen before. All right, and this one is called random number. So we see on lines 8 through 11, we have this random number command, all right? And then we also have lines 19 through 22 show us this random number command, all right? And the command that we have it's the same for both of these, right? These are the same 4 lines of code in both of these on events, all right? So we have a set property for the hawk, and the x coordinates are changing, right? This is a set property, so we're changing something about the x coordinate that it's on. And this says random number, parentheses, 0, 100. All right, then our next line says set property, also of the hawk. This time, instead of the x-axis, it's the y-axis position we're changing. And again, random number, this time 0, 200 instead of 0, 100. So what do you guys think that random number command is doing? So what we are actually doing is, because we're changing the x and y location of the hawk on the screen, right? It's moving the hawk around the screen when we mouse over it. It is just picking a random location on the screen between the 0 and 100 pixels on the x-axis, and then a random number between the 0 and 200 pixels marks on the y-axis. All right, so something else to note, right? When I hover my mouse over the user interface when it's not running, it gives me the x and the y coordinates that my cursor is sitting at. So like right here on the screen, it's X 161 pixel and the Y 278 pixel, right? So we are getting those coordinates on the X and Y wherever our mouse cursor is, right? The hawk and the sparrow are also positioned on the screen with their X and Y coordinates. So this random number is just randomly putting the hawk and the sparrow somewhere on the screen, right? So it says each time the random number runs, there's a possibility of a different result, right? Because it's just randomizing it. And then it says, why do the birds move even if they're not clicked? Are there other options? Well, obviously there are, because these both are set to mouse over. So we don't have to click them. We just have to move our mouse over top of them, which is what's called a mouse over, and they will move, right? So the birds don't have to be clicked. The mouse over is going to move those, all right? So we need to make some modifications here as well. All right, we need to make the birds move around the entire screen. Right now, they are restricted to just this top left corner because our X and Y, the X goes up to a max of 100 and the Y goes up to a max of 200 right now. So X 100 is about right there, and Y 200, let's go down just a little bit more, Y 200 is right there. All right, so this little corner of the screen here is the only area that the hawk and the sparrow are allowed to move into right now, because that is what our coordinates are telling them to do. All right, if I put my cursor all the way down here on the bottom right corner of the screen, I see that my X coordinate there is 306 and my Y coordinate is 433. So I don't want to go like all the way to the very, very corner of the screen because the top corner, the top left corner is where it starts. So if this image has this imaginary box around it of the sparrow, the top left corner of the sparrow is where it's positioned, right? And the top right corner or top left corner of the hawk is where it's positioned. So if I were to position my sparrow, let's say at 320, X 320 and Y 450, it would basically be off the screen to the point where I could hardly see it. So I'm going to come in a little bit from that corner just so we can still see what's on the screen there. So if I say, let's say X 290 and Y 420, sure, that looks good to me. All right, so I'm going to change it so my X can be any number between 0 and 290. So we want to change that 100 to say 290. Ooh, if I can click in there, come on. We'll just backspace this way. All right, 290. All right, and then I want my Y, all right, to not go, let's say anything above, 420. All right, so that's going to be any number between 0 and 420. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing for the sparrow, random number location. All right, so it's going to be between 0 and 290 for my x-axis position and 0 and 420 for my y-axis position. All right, and then we'll do the same thing down here in the sparrow mouse over, right? Because this, if I mouse over the sparrow, it's still restricting them to the top left corner, so I have to change this on event too. All right, so it's going to be x-axis again, 290. We'll just change that one as well, 290, and then y-axis 0 to 420. And then 0 to 420 again. All right, so before we move on to our other modification that we need to make, we're going to run and make sure that our hawk and sparrow are actually moving when we mouse over to the whole screen and not in the top corner. Let's see what happens. All right, oops, our sparrow moved way down there. Our hawk has moved way down there. So we are getting movement all over the screen now instead of just restricting the birds to that top left corner. All right, so it looks good where we need to be. All right, so our second modification we need to make is to experiment with other event types besides mouse over and click, right? We've seen the click before, and this one we've seen this mouse over. But we have all these other options as well, all right? So you want to experiment with these and see what actually will work and what will not work to make our hawk and sparrow move around the screen, right? Will a key press work? Will a mouse up work, right? Will a key down work or a key up work? All right, so try a few of these options. Let's go ahead and do the key press for the hawk. Okay, that one does not appear to be working. I assure you I am pressing keys. All right, nothing is happening. All right, so a key press is not going to make my hawk and sparrow move. All right, so try a few of these, see what works and what doesn't. All right, change it to something that works. And then once you've found what works for you, go ahead and click on Finish. And you can move on and answer the Check for Understanding question in Bubble 8. So that is all I have for this lesson today. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, need additional help with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out and I will be happy to assist you. I am so excited to get on to coding our very first apps. See you guys next time.